Black intern greeted deaf visitor in sign language, unaware that CEO. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of the corporate lobby, scattering golden light across the polished marble floors. The hum of air conditioning mingled with the soft click of heels and the murmur of conversation. Maya stood near the reception desk, a freshly printed ID badge hanging awkwardly around her neck. She adjusted it nervously, glancing at the stream of sharply dressed employees who seemed to move with purpose she had yet to understand. The air carried a mix of ambition, quiet competitiveness, and the faint scent of expensive coffee, reminders of the world she had entered. A world that felt both dazzling and intimidating. Maya's eyes darted over the lobby again. She was new, an intern, and often felt invisible, like a shadow brushing against lives far more polished and practiced than hers. Every smile she forced, every word she spoke seemed to fall just short of connection. She drew in a breath, steadying herself, letting the faint warmth of sunlight fill her senses. The reception desk buzzed as a man approached. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, exuding quiet confidence. But there was something unusual about the way he moved. His hands rose in subtle, precise gestures, fingers dancing in a rhythm only those fluent could understand. Maya's attention sharpened immediately. Without hesitation, her hands lifted, mirroring the elegant flow of sign language she had practiced since childhood. Each motion was precise yet warm, her fingers tracing invisible lines in the air, her eyes holding the gentle encouragement of someone who understood the weight of being unseen. "Good morning," she signed. Her movements calm, her smile effortless. The man's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise and recognition crossing his face. He paused, the world around him slowing for a moment, as though her gesture had created a bubble of understanding in the midst of the corporate rush. For a heartbeat, he looked truly seen, something Maya knew well, the quiet relief of being acknowledged without words. Around them, employees glanced over. Some whispered, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Others continued about their business, indifferent to the interaction that held a hidden gravity. Maya, unaware of the attention, continued her greeting with a nod, her hands flowing naturally, as if she were merely welcoming a colleague. Inside her mind, Maya felt the familiar tug of self-doubt. "Do I belong here?" The question hovered like a shadow, brushing against her confidence. She caught her reflection in the glass panels, the sharp lines of her blazer, the smooth, polished floor beneath her feet. But it wasn't the reflection of power she saw. It was someone striving, someone small in a world built for giants, yet unwilling to shrink away. The visitor's lips curved into a soft, appreciative smile, the kind that radiates warmth without fanfare. Maya sensed the gratitude, the quiet acknowledgement of a connection formed beyond spoken language. She smiled back, unaware of the significance of this fleeting moment, thinking only of the simple act of kindness. Unseen by her, a figure observed from a corner of the lobby. He stood tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that spoke of authority and wealth, yet his eyes lingered on Maya with quiet fascination. The visitor, he was not just anyone, was the CEO of the company, here to observe a meeting of top executives. He noted Maya's humility, the effortless way she treated someone entirely different from herself with dignity and respect. In that observation, he saw a rare authenticity, a courage that was subtle yet profoundly human. Maya's hands lowered slowly as the visitor nodded, as if to say, "Thank you." She returned to her position by the reception desk, adjusting her badge again, unaware that the small act of greeting had left an imprint far greater than she could imagine. The lobby continued its rhythm, footsteps echoing softly, sunlight glinting off polished floors, hushed conversations threading through the space. But Maya felt a quiet satisfaction. She had done nothing extraordinary. Yet in that simplicity, she had bridged a silent gap, offering recognition where it was often denied. As the man turned to leave, the faintest smile lingered on his lips, a silent promise that this encounter would not be forgotten. Maya watched him disappear into the elevator, the doors sliding shut with a soft thud, and returned to her small corner of the lobby. The world of wealth, power, and polished ambition continued around her, unaware of the subtle collision of worlds that had just taken place, and in that quiet, unassuming way. The first spark was lit, a connection that would ripple further than she could ever imagine. A reminder that even in a world built on appearances, empathy, courage, and authenticity held a power all their own. The corner of the lobby offered a rare sanctuary from the hum of business. Michael, the CEO, leaned slightly against the polished glass wall, his tailored suit a sharp contrast to the soft morning light filtering through. His fingers tapped a quiet rhythm against the marble ledge, and for a moment, the weight of his title seemed to melt away, leaving only a man quietly reflecting on the scene he had just witnessed. Flashbacks flickered in his mind, like fragmented film reels. He saw himself years ago, a first-generation immigrant navigating the labyrinth of corporate hierarchies. He remembered the invisibility, the way people glanced past him as though he were nothing more than background noise. Each promotion, each accolade, had been hard-earned, but the cost had been steep, a growing distance from genuine human connection. Faces blurred in memory, conversations half forgotten, moments of kindness overlooked in the relentless climb toward power. A close-up lingered on Michael's face. The tightness of his jaw, the furrow of his brow, the subtle tension around his eyes. Beneath the impeccable suit and commanding presence, traces of vulnerability peeked through, a quiet sadness that power and wealth could never entirely mask. His gaze softened, memories of struggles now mirrored in the small, unassuming gestures of someone else, a young intern whose courage was silent but profound. Meanwhile, Maya returned to her station behind the reception desk, her energy a mixture of determination and nervous exhilaration. She moved with purpose, answering emails, guiding visitors, and juggling the constant rhythm of coffee runs, all while trying not to stumble over minor clerical errors that highlighted her inexperience. Her hands moved deftly across keyboards, her eyes scanning schedules and memos, a tiny underdog in the vast machinery of corporate life. Around her, whispers threaded through the cubicles. Colleagues exchanged glances, some amused, others impressed. "Did you see her greet the visitor in sign language?" one murmured, a mixture of curiosity and admiration in his tone. "Bold move for an intern," another said, smirking, the mockery barely hidden. Maya, immersed in her work, remained blissfully unaware of the ripple her small act had caused. The social landscape of the office was subtle but stark. Luxury handbags perched on polished desks, designer shoes clicked against pristine floors, and hushed conversations carried the weight of status and influence. In the midst of it all, Maya's quiet diligence and innate kindness stood out like a beacon of sincerity in a world often dominated by appearances. Every gesture she made, handing a folder with a smile, offering a brief nod of acknowledgement, contrasted sharply with the carefully curated performances of her more senior colleagues. Michael's eyes followed her from across the room, hidden by the reflection of the glass wall. He noticed the way she paused mid-task to adjust a visitor's papers, the subtle care she took in balancing efficiency with empathy. Each movement, small as it seemed, carried a weight that was invisible to most, but not to him. He saw the human connection that others often ignored, the humility that spoke louder than any title or suit. The tension between worlds was palpable, the unspoken divide between wealth and influence versus dedication and sincerity. Maya represented the essence of quiet resilience, the underdog navigating a landscape built for those born into privilege. Michael recognized a truth he had long forgotten, that genuine value often resided not in power or position, but in authenticity, in the courage to be kind and present, even when unseen. A cinematic shot framed the scene. Michael standing behind the reflective glass, half of his face bathed in light, the other half cloaked in shadow. It was a visual metaphor, a subtle reminder that perception is layered, and judgment is often filtered through unseen experiences. The contrast captured the delicate balance between observation and understanding, between what is visible and what lies beneath. As Maya continued her tasks, unaware of the silent scrutiny, the camera lingered on Michael's contemplative expression. The echoes of his own past struggles intertwined with the present moment, creating a bridge between two lives, different in circumstance, yet connected by the quiet humanity that often went unnoticed in the corridors of power. In that suspended silence, the audience sensed the unspoken promise of transformation. Observing Maya was more than mere curiosity. It was a recognition that true insight often comes from witnessing courage in its simplest form. The scene closed with a lingering shot of Michael's reflective gaze, the light and shadow dancing across his features, hinting at the layers of empathy, judgment, and understanding yet to unfold. Weeks had passed since the brief encounter in the lobby, and Maya's days had settled into the familiar rhythm of emails, coffee runs, and meticulous note-taking. She had learned to navigate the quiet currents of office life, her presence almost invisible among colleagues who moved with the assurance of long tenure and privilege. Yet on this particular morning, an unexpected email blinked on her screen. "Please report to the executive boardroom immediately." Her stomach twisted with a mix of curiosity and nerves. The suspense was tangible, each step toward the elevator echoing in her chest. She imagined HR personnel, routine assignments, maybe even a minor reprimand for a clerical oversight. Hum of the elevator, the metallic clink of buttons, all built a crescendo, each sound magnifying the unknown awaiting her. The grand boardroom doors loomed ahead, tall and imposing, their polished wood gleaming under the soft glow of recessed lighting. Maya hesitated briefly, taking a breath as if to steady herself. With a quiet push, the doors swung open, revealing a space far larger and more luxurious than anything she had imagined from behind the reception desk. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a sweeping cityscape, light spilling across a massive mahogany table, rows of high-backed chairs standing like silent sentinels. And there he was, Michael. The CEO, the very figure whose power seemed untouchable, stood at the head of the table, a smile that radiated warmth and calm greeting her. Maya's heart raced. Disbelief clashed with awe. Her mind scrambled for words, yet none came immediately. "Good morning, Maya," Michael said, his voice steady but gentle, carrying the weight of authority without intimidation. "Do you remember the lobby?" Maya blinked, realization dawning. The moment flashed back, the exchange of sign language, the quiet connection, the invisible bond between two worlds. Her fingers twitched nervously at her sides, though she remained seated, caught between surprise and an urge to flee. Maya stammered, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know you saw me." Michael shook his head, his expression softening. "I saw you more than anyone else did. Your instinctive kindness, your willingness to see and acknowledge someone, that tells me far more about a person than any resume ever could." He paused, letting the words sink in, each syllable reinforcing a rare truth. Merit and humanity mattered here, above hierarchy and title. Maya's chest swelled with a mixture of humility and disbelief. Her small frame felt insignificant against the grandeur of the room, the towering windows, the endless expanse of the city outside. But in that moment, she realized presence was not measured by size or power. It was measured by authenticity. "I was just doing what felt right," she murmured, voice quivering with emotion. "I never imagined it." Michael's gaze was steady, reassuring. That's exactly why it mattered. The courage to act with empathy, to bridge gaps without expecting recognition, that is what creates true impact. You've reminded me, and everyone who observes, that genuine influence begins with humanity, not authority. The dialogue lingered, rich with emotional nuance. Maya's mind raced, reconciling the contrast between her underdog status and the immense respect she now received from the highest office in the company. For the first time, she felt a shift, not in her surroundings, but in herself. She was beginning to understand the ripple effect of small acts, the power inherent in authenticity, and the subtle influence of empathy. Michael gestured toward the expansive city view. "You see this skyline? It represents countless achievements. But it also reminds me that every connection, every act of understanding, builds the foundation beneath the towers of success. Your presence here proves that even in worlds dominated by wealth and influence, one person's integrity can resonate far beyond expectation." Maya nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of his words. The grandeur of the room, the polished surfaces, the sharp angles of authority, all contrasted with the warmth and truth she brought into the space. She realized that her journey was no longer about fitting in. It was about bridging divides, using empathy as her currency in a world that often measured worth by power alone. A quiet moment settled between them, punctuated only by the soft hum of the city beyond the glass. Maya's heart, still fluttering, steadied with newfound clarity. She was small in stature, yet her impact stretched far beyond her awareness, a testament to courage exercised with kindness. Michael's smile widened slightly. "Remember this, Maya. Influence is not the loudest voice nor the grandest gesture. Sometimes, it is the silent courage of one who sees what others overlook." Maya exhaled, a sense of purpose igniting within her. The underdog transformation had begun, not with a promotion or a title, but with recognition, understanding, and the courage to remain authentic in a world that often demanded conformity. The chapter closed with a lingering cinematic frame. Maya standing by the grand windows, city light washing over her small form, radiating an authenticity and courage that would continue to ripple through the corridors of power. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the conference room as Maya set up her laptop, her fingers brushing over the keyboard with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. Michael had invited her to sit at the head of the table, not as an intern, but as a mentee, a voice to be heard. The air was charged with subtle tension. Colleagues whispered behind closed laptops, some curious, others skeptical, and a few openly skeptical of the young woman stepping into a space dominated by polished executives. Maya drew a steadying breath, feeling the familiar flutter of self-doubt tug at her chest. Her background, her small stature, her status as an intern, they all felt magnified in the grand conference room. She glanced briefly toward Michael, who leaned against the wall, silent and attentive, a faint nod encouraging her forward. That single gesture steadied her, reminding her that her worth was not measured by the number of titles in the room. When she began to speak, her hands trembled slightly at first, brushing over notes and slides projected onto the wall. But as her words unfolded, confidence emerged. She articulated her ideas clearly, weaving data with insight, and infusing each point with the sincerity of someone who understood the real-world impact of her work. Close-ups revealed her face. Determination etched alongside vulnerability, a quiet courage reflected in her eyes. Michael observed from the corner, his expression unreadable yet full of silent approval. He had seen the spark in the lobby weeks ago, and now he witnessed it translated into tangible action, an authentic voice bridging worlds, connecting strategy with humanity. He allowed her room to stumble, to pause, to recalibrate. Mentorship, he knew, was not about control, but about guidance and trust. Around the table, reactions varied. Some colleagues shifted uneasily in their seats, whispers of jealousy barely contained. "She's so young." "An intern presenting to us?" one murmured. Others nodded subtly, admiration creeping into otherwise reserved expressions. The contrast between skepticism and growing respect captured the subtle tension of corporate hierarchies, a world where assumptions about background often overshadowed merit. As the meeting progressed, Maya's ideas began to take shape into actionable plans. One initiative focused on underrepresented communities, designed to create opportunities for those often overlooked. Her voice carried more than strategy. It carried empathy, a deep understanding of social gaps, and the belief that business could be a force for transformation. She illustrated her points with data, real-life anecdotes, and heartfelt reasoning. By the end, the executives leaned forward, not simply impressed by her knowledge, but moved by the authenticity behind it. Michael's quiet presence remained a steady anchor. He interjected occasionally, not to dominate, but to amplify her insights, subtly guiding attention to the value of her ideas. His mentorship was a silent acknowledgement that influence was cultivated through encouragement, not intimidation. In that space, Maya felt the social divide blur, not erased but bridged by competence, empathy, and courage. The weeks that followed brought subtle shifts. Colleagues who had initially doubted her began to adjust their perceptions. Some grudgingly admitted her talent. Others, quietly inspired, mirrored her approach to collaboration. Yet the change that mattered most was within Maya herself. She began to internalize her worth, recognizing that influence did not require conformity or approval, but the courage to act authentically, to connect beyond the constraints of status and expectation. A cinematic sequence captured her evolution. Slow-motion shots of Maya walking through the lobby, sunlight catching her hair, her posture upright, her gaze confident. Employees who once passed her without a second glance now met her eyes with acknowledgement. The reflection of glass walls mirrored not only the grandeur of the corporate world, but the transformation of the young woman navigating it. Every step she took seemed measured, not by fear, but by awareness of the subtle power of presence and empathy. Maya's journey was no longer about being noticed. It was about noticing others, bridging worlds through acts that were simultaneously small and monumental. The project for underrepresented communities began to take root, demonstrating that her kindness was not performative. It was transformative, a reflection of a heart willing to connect, inspire, and uplift. As the chapter drew to a close, Maya paused near the reception desk, glancing out through the glass walls of the lobby. She exhaled, a quiet smile forming as the sunlight traced the contours of her face. The subtle shift was complete. She was now fully seen, not just by the world around her, but by herself. And in that recognition lay the promise of the impact yet to come, a bridge built not with power or privilege, but with empathy, courage, and unwavering authenticity. The boardroom felt unusually tense that morning. Phones buzzed incessantly, emails flooded in, and murmurs of worry rippled through the team. A major client, pivotal to the company's upcoming quarter, had threatened to pull a critical deal due to miscommunications and internal mismanagement. Panic clung to the air like a heavy fog, settling on every polished surface. Every anxious glance exchanged between executives. Maya sat quietly at the edge of the conference table, her posture upright, her fingers tapping lightly against her notebook. The familiar tremor of nerves flickered across her hands, but this time it was tempered by a growing sense of purpose. She had faced self-doubt before and emerged stronger. She knew that if she stayed silent, the opportunity to make a meaningful impact would vanish. "I can handle the client call," she volunteered, her voice steady, but carrying a hint of urgency. Heads turned, a few eyebrows arched, skeptical of the young intern daring to step into a crisis where seasoned executives hesitated. Michael's eyes met hers from across the room. His expression was calm, almost stern, but pride glimmered beneath the surface. He nodded, ever so slightly, granting her permission to act. The client was deaf, and communication had been fraught with misunderstandings. Maya's fluency in sign language became the bridge that had been missing, her hands translating nuance and emotion where spoken words had failed. Fast cuts alternated between Maya's precise, fluid gestures and the client's reactions, initial confusion melting into relief and understanding. Heartbeat-like sound effects underscored the tension, every subtle pause magnifying the stakes. Some executives resisted, whispering doubts about her age, her race, her status as an intern. "Shouldn't we let someone senior handle this?" One murmured under his breath. Yet Maya ignored the undercurrents of bias, focusing entirely on clarity, empathy, and problem-solving. Her presence commanded attention without demanding it, her authenticity cutting through layers of skepticism. She guided the conversation with quiet authority, clarifying points, bridging cultural and linguistic gaps, and addressing concerns the client hadn't voiced openly. Each nod, each carefully signed phrase carried both precision and compassion. Slowly, tension dissolved, and the client's demeanor shifted from frustration to trust. Maya's calm determination was the catalyst. The room's nervous energy gradually recalibrated around her competence. Michael observed from a distance, his usually reserved features revealing just a flicker of pride. He recognized the hero archetype unfolding before him, not the loud, commanding leader, but the underdog transforming fear into action, quietly asserting influence through empathy and intellect. The executives who had doubted her now leaned forward, attentive, some with grudging admiration, others with the reluctant acknowledgement that talent and courage do not bow to age or hierarchy. Cinematic techniques punctuated the drama. Tight angles captured the slight quiver of Maya's hands before she steadied them. Rapid cuts between tense expressions of executives and the relieved smiles of the client, and the steadying rhythm of her breath synced with the soft pulse of a heartbeat soundtrack. Every visual element highlighted the stakes, the pressure, and the triumph of poise under crisis. As the call concluded, the client nodded firmly, the deal secured. Relief washed over the room in waves, yet Maya remained focused, methodically summarizing next steps, ensuring clarity, and leaving no room for ambiguity. Her quiet authority had not only salvaged the deal, but had elevated her presence in the company, bridging the gap between perception and reality, between bias and recognition. Michael stepped forward as the room began to disperse, his hands clasped behind his back. "You handled that exceptionally well," he said, voice measured, betraying just a hint of pride. "Remember this. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Empathy can transform situations that logic alone cannot. Today, you've done both." Maya exhaled, a mixture of relief and exhilaration settling over her. The crisis was over, but the lessons ran deeper. Leadership was not confined to titles. Power could be wielded with kindness, and real influence often came from bridging gaps others overlooked. She had not only preserved a deal, but had subtly reshaped the perceptions of those around her, demonstrating that true courage is inseparable from empathy. The chapter closed with a cinematic frame of Maya walking through the lobby, her reflection mirrored in the polished glass. The city sunlight traced her form, confident and composed, her journey of transformation tangible in her steady stride. Behind her, the echoes of skepticism lingered no longer. Instead, the space seemed to acknowledge her presence, a visual testament to the power of integrity, courage, and human connection in a world often ruled by hierarchy. The morning light streamed through the towering glass walls of the lobby, painting long golden streaks across the polished marble floor. Maya walked in with the quiet confidence of someone who had come a long way, her stride steady, her posture upright, her presence no longer hesitant, but radiantly assured. Today was not just another day at the office. It was the day her journey came full circle. An official announcement had been circulated earlier, and Maya now found herself summoned to the front of the lobby. Michael, the CEO who had once silently observed her in the same space weeks ago, awaited her near the reception desk. His smile was warm, genuine, a quiet acknowledgement of the growth he had witnessed. He handed her a formal recognition award, the polished plaque gleaming in the morning sun. "You've done remarkable work, Maya," he said, his voice carrying the weight of sincerity and admiration. "Not just with results, but with integrity, courage, and the empathy that bridges divides others often ignore." Maya felt her heart swell with a mixture of pride and humility. She accepted the award with both hands, bowing slightly in acknowledgement, her eyes reflecting gratitude rather than triumph. "Thank you, sir," she murmured, voice steady yet brimming with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance." Michael shook his head, smiling softly. "No, you did it yourself. I simply gave you space to see what you already carried inside." His words resonated deeply, echoing the mentorship, trust, and subtle encouragement that had transformed her confidence into action. As the small crowd of colleagues clapped politely, Maya's gaze wandered to the entrance of the lobby. A new visitor approached, walking with subtle hesitance, signing gently with their hands. Without thinking, Maya stepped forward. Her hands rose instinctively, flowing with the same grace and warmth she had demonstrated weeks ago. Every gesture was precise, yet imbued with humanity, her eyes reflecting sincere kindness. The visitor's face brightened instantly, a flicker of surprise and recognition mirrored in their smile. The scene was cinematic, a delicate interplay of light, reflection, and motion. Colleagues watched quietly, some whispering in admiration. Others simply moved by the effortless bridge Maya had created between worlds. From the corner of the lobby, Michael stepped into frame, his presence quiet but significant. He observed her with a small, approving nod, his smile confirming the growth he had nurtured and the courage she had embodied. The reflections in the glass walls mirrored their forms, merging imagery of humility and influence, kindness and power, opportunity and merit. The lobby, once a place of intimidating hierarchy, now felt transformed, a space where empathy and authenticity reigned alongside ambition and wealth. Maya continued to communicate with the visitor, her motions flowing naturally, her confidence radiant. She realized that this moment, though small and seemingly routine, symbolized everything she had learned: courage in vulnerability, influence through empathy, and the extraordinary ripple of small acts of humanity. Michael approached her quietly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "True strength," he said, his voice steady and guiding, "is recognizing the value of those the world overlooks." The words lingered, not as a command, but as a principle Maya now embodied fully. She nodded, understanding that her journey was not defined by titles or accolades, but by the courage to act with compassion and integrity. The camera pulled back, capturing the layered reflections in the glass. Maya's humble figure intertwined with Michael's commanding presence. The bustling city beyond mirrored alongside their quiet, deliberate connection. The lobby, sunlight dancing across its surfaces, became a symbolic stage for the merging of worlds: power and kindness, wealth and empathy, influence and merit. As Maya concluded her interaction with the visitor and returned to her place by the reception desk, a sense of completion settled over her. The journey from nervous intern to confident, empathetic leader had come full circle. Every act of recognition, every gesture of humanity, every moment of courage had accumulated into this present reality. Proof that one person's integrity could ripple into transformative change for others. The chapter closed with a final, lingering frame, Maya standing poised, light cascading across her face, the award shining subtly in her hands, reflections layering the lobby's glass walls. Behind her, Michael's smile lingered, a silent affirmation of mentorship realized, of worlds bridged, and of the enduring power of kindness in defining destiny.